Now on to Michael.
Thank you so much, Akosa. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to see a lot of you that I've known throughout the years. Barbara, it's great to see you again. And I'm excited about this conversation. My name is Michael Mendoza, and I'm a consultant. I've been doing consulting work with the Columbia Justice Lab for a few years now. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, titled Seek, Hear, and Honor the Voices of Community Members, Families, and justice-involved individuals as equal partners in system reform. Um, and as mentioned, this is a coffee chat. If you need to drink some water, eat some food, please feel free to do so. I'm in a t-shirt working from home, so I hope that we can all make this a good discussion and chime in. Please ask me questions throughout the conversation in the chat, and we'll make the best of it. But I do want to quickly just continue to introduce myself, give you a little bit of background, show you a presentation about 10 to 15 minutes, and then would just love either feedback, questions, something that just keeps the conversation going around why it's important to involve people from the community, especially impacted people, in any policy effort or movement. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to start with this presentation. Hopefully it works. I hope everybody can see my screen. Is that correct? Perfect. Let me go back to that last picture. In my previous role prior to it being a consultant, I was the Director of Advocacy for a nonprofit organization called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition based in Los Angeles, California. I still am a member of the organization, but this picture here was taken in the capital, Sacramento, in California. A lot of people, obviously, but what you don't know about these people is most of them have been formerly incarcerated. But you also have attorneys, you have family members, you even have victims of violent crime that are within this picture that all came together as community to meaningfully and civically engage in policy priorities in California. And prior to my role again as a consultant and working in the nonprofit space, I like to say that policy saved my life. And what I mean by that is I made a really bad decision at 15, one that I'll always regret. And that decision landed me in prison for the age of 15 until the age of 32 when I had to earn my release. And that's unfortunately because of gang violence. I was involved in a gang related crime that took the life of another young man. I should have been held responsible as I was, and I ended up paying my sentence and serving my time. I earned my release in 2014, but it was only because a law changed, and I wondered how did that law change? Who made that happen? And I ended up going to school at SF State for policy to learn how people were able to make a change in policy and give people hope, such as myself. And the other two gentlemen who you see in this picture also received an opportunity to earn their way home because of policy change. You see Senator Lonnie Hancock in this picture. She was the author of this bill who allowed us to come home. And this is a really important picture, not just for me personally, but in this discussion about why it's important to involve people who are directly impacted in any meaningful conversation or policy change from the community. Since I've been home and working with ARC and a lot of many other people, we've been able to pass 33 bills in California from 2014 to 22. We've had over 466 members of the organization impacted by legislation. And a lot of our work really bridged the gap between elected officials and members with their constituents impacted by incarceration. And in this picture, you'll see how we actually were able to take a big trip, a group of around 50 individuals to Washington, D.C., to meet with staffers and legislatures about treating kids like kids and how important that was as an issue within our constituency. And so I share all of that because those things were important within a member organization or a community as we were civically engaged in the community. Three components of civically engaging in the community is organizing, bringing people together, who have a common goal, interest, or shared experience. Another ingredient, the second one, is building community. Once you do bring people together from the community, you share stories and you discuss what brings people together. It's usually within those important conversations where people will bring their guards down, become vulnerable, and share, what we all do have in common, and build from there. You'll be surprised that in terms of how many people have so much in common once you get past certain barriers that people just protect themselves with, whether it's a cultural upbringing or a political ideology. A lot of those barriers we brought down simply by building community and sharing stories. And once you're able to organize, build community, then it's time to civically engage. Um, Civically engaging people is very empowering. It empowers people to civically engage in meaningful ways by directly telling their lawmakers, their leaders locally, state or federally, what's important to them within their own communities. What does safety look like to them? And so, in a lot of these in moments when we're trying to engage community, these are some of the three key components that I've experienced myself and with others. What comes out of meaningfully engaging folks in those ways? Some of the visual. I love to share pictures and stories, and mostly everyone you see here are young people that have been impacted by incarceration. And on the local level, you see young people who organize, who are formerly incarcerated, when they are given a meaningful opportunity by, simply by giving an opportunity to speak and share their story towards a purpose. It gives even young people ways to be meaningfully involved in their communities. And I emphasize that as really important because when you, especially with people who are impacted by any issue, whether it's incarceration, whether it's housing, giving someone impacted by an issue an opportunity to meaningfully engage in community advocacy, it's healing, it's empowering, and it's the far extreme opposite of what this community once did feel. And that was the extreme opposite. It was hopelessness. It was being pushed away. It was being called criminals, ex-felons, ex-cons. And that paints a different picture. It makes communities feel a different way, not necessarily empowered, but disempowered. And so when you create the quite opposite and you engage community in an empowering way, such as the Columbia Justice Lab does. I remember we recently went to New York just to talk about, probation and parole and what the future of that looks like. And those are empowering moments when you are there with other stakeholders, having meaningful conversations, being able to answer questions and give input. And you'll find that just like my friend Kenzo here, you'll find some of their reactions is really, really positive. He says that when he became a public policy advocate for ARC, he was able to advocate for those who were in his shoes, and it pushed him to a higher level in life that made him feel good about himself and build confidence. You see a lot of our what we consider as sisters in the movement, women who are formerly incarcerated, also heavily engaged in issues important to them as well. providing this space is equally important. And so on the state advocacy level, when being able to do so, we've been able to have some wins, but also some failures. But the most important thing is giving people something positive and proactive to do socially within their communities, that's really, really meaningful and also helpful, in terms of, I think the most important key thing that's helpful is a lot of times, no offense, but people in government or whether it's local, state, or federal, sometimes we get so bogged down in the work and the research and the reports, we get kind of disconnected from community. And so when we bring each other back and have these kind of discussions and include people in this conversation, we get connected again and we remind ourselves of how our work from a government agency standpoint really does impact people on the ground. And here's another dear friend of mine, Manuel Gomez. Manuel Gomez is a former veteran who was incarcerated. And when he came home, passion was reignited by fighting for a housing bill that he was impacted by. As a veteran coming back from fighting in the wars, it was hard for him to get housing. And so it was important for him to become an advocate and learn about policy and be engaged with elected officials about why this housing bill was important to him and his family. And so when you engage one individual, you actually engage their families as well. And you're providing a unique opportunity that many people, many tax-paying citizens don't really take advantage of. And that's simply talking to the elected officials, their leaders, and their state agency partners about resources and what's important to them in life. It's even so important to get people impacted by the issues directly partnering with elected officials. Here you see a good friend of mine, Norma Kumpian. She spent around 21 years in prison. Now she's doing amazing things. She's been pardoned. She works on a state agency board, and here she is with Assemblymember Marie Waldron, promoting and advocating for the Healthy Start Act, which would have protected women in prisons. And so when you are able to appropriately and meaningfully engage people in advocacy opportunities, when we want to ensure that we hear them and listen to them as meaningful and equal partners, we can make a lot of impact, not just on one person, but their families. Melissa Mercado and her son here, she spent 16 years in prison, and was able to come home, and now she's a mother to her family, and she's going to school, and she's giving back in her community by participating in advocacy efforts. And sometimes, and I wish I knew how to get the sound on, but sometimes even when the media recognizes these things, this is a clip, a really short clip in partnership that we had did with CBS News, KCAL 9 News. And part of what they would discuss in this little short clip was how it's important to engage people who are formerly incarcerated in the programs that are out there to meaningfully involve people. So it's about safety, right? At the end of the day, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I'm almost done in a few minutes. I'm just going to close it off right here. But, at the end of the day, when we really want to seek, hear, and honor the voices of people who have been impacted by criminal justice, it's not just who we know as the offender. It's their family members who are also doing time with these individuals. It's also victims of crime that have a lot in common with what we want to see in terms of safety and rehabilitation. And so we really want to define terms as what is a partner, how do we civilly engage community members, and what does it mean when we say an equal partner, and how do we ensure that we provide meaningful opportunities and not just ask for the stories but to really dig through what solutions are. And I'll give an example, and I'd love to hear from you all. Is when we have policy meetings, we even ask people who are impacted by the bill, what do you think about these amendments? They're asking us about to change these words from shall to possibly, just giving an example. We get people meaningfully involved to that extent when it's appropriate, when it's healthy. And sometimes it's building up towards that, right? It's the coffee chats, it's what are we engaging on? And I think the North Star is always really important. And in these kind of environments, it's always around safety and what does safety look like? Because at the end of the day, we all want safety. And for a community that we are trying to serve and help and support within your realms, it's about finding out what those common goals are to engage folks in meaningful ways. So it's organizing, it's building community, and it's civically engaging. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen as soon as I can figure out how. So that was the gist of the presentation. I hope everyone was able to hear that. I can definitely share with you all afterwards as well, but that's the topic we're on, and I'd love to hear from you all in terms of your experience communicating or um, partnering with members of the community that your work impacts, and what was that like, and is there a desire to do more of it, and how?
Michael, I think I'll have a different type of question. I know in working with a variety of different jurisdictions, a lot of places are struggling where they don't have like an California-based not-for-profits or advocacy groups. How would you suggest for a jurisdiction, whether it be rural right on up to a big urban, that may not have advocacy groups, go about engaging the community?
Thank you for that question, Barbara. And you kind of broke up. If did I hear correctly that the question is, for groups or agencies that don't have a nonprofit in their local area, then how do you build that community connection? Um, well, if I'm thinking about probation and parole departments, there's and Barbara, I know you know a lot about this. There's something that we are looking at now called credible messengers. I really do believe, and I'm starting to see, especially in some of the work in California, where credible messengers are partnering with probation departments or parole departments, and really providing that connection with community, uh, by setting up meetings, or when there already are weekly meetings with people on caseloads or already set. It's inviting community members with food and drinks. It's really about just making that community connection and building it any way you can. And I think some of the greatest third party liaisons are credible messengers that know which community members are passionate about being involved and aren't just there for resources or to get free food, but actually really want to meaningfully engage. And so I would first say, think about or consider working with credible messengers, or people directly in the community, and just having gatherings of sorts if possible. I don't know if that's helpful or not, Barbara.
No, it is very helpful. Again, some jurisdictions haven't even heard of credible messengers. And it really is, how do you take a jurisdiction or a leader who may be interested in giving voice and finding the way to do that? That's where I was going.
It doesn't hurt to hire consultants, or even continue to work with folks like the Columbia Justice Lab. Consider hiring somebody who's formerly incarcerated and impacted. There's just a lot of different ways that can really, really be helpful in that. Adolfo, I see your hand up.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Barbara, for that question as well. I think what we're doing here in DC is using the critical messenger. We're gonna have a strong advocate group like we had in LA with ARC. Is Sam Lewis still there, by the way, Mr. Mendoza?
I'm sorry?
Sam Lewis still there?
He's there. Yes, he is.
Okay. Send him my regards, please.
I will. I will.
And what we do here is that we not only do we work with the credible messengers, we should hire them in a federal system. Many of them would not be able to get a job in a federal system. We get them in here so they get started, and then they can get the word out as well. But giving them an opportunity to be successful by removing some of those barriers that we talk about. And working the federal system is very challenging. And by doing this program that we have here, it is opening doors to many of our residents who are returning citizens. I just want to share that piece with you all.
Thank you, Adolfo.
In Ramsey County, we use credible messengers. However, we call the group that we work with Healing Streets, who work primarily with all of our clients who are, anytime there's any gun violence, they go in, but a majority of them start with our kids and the families. We also have money attached to our programs to help families relocate, get out of town for a while if they need to, while we work with them on probation and Healing Streets. Some of the stuff that we implemented in the past year has been very helpful with the community. We host through our racial equity coordinators. We have 2 of them that work right with probation. Community listening sessions at the cultural centers, and learned a lot working, increasing our relationship with the Karen population that is increasing in Ramsey County, the Hmong population, and working with the elders. So having those relationships have very helped a lot. All of our policy that's not internal policy, such as regular stuff, we don't have community on, but I do have a panel that sits on our policy review. They bring me recommendations for like they did min-qual reviews and brought recommendations how we could better do our min-quals, and that is community driven. So the panel sits right with us. And then I work with 2 people who, Michael, have the same exact background that you have, and do similar work here in Minnesota, Tierra and Eli, who are my cohorts in the sense of any of the decisions that I'm going to make while we're in probation, and in our, because I run the jail and the juvenile detention center. They are consultants for me personally to ensure that I'm getting all lenses. So we have a lot of work going on in Ramsey County with the community.
I love that, Monica, and why I really love that is because I think a lot of your work, especially relates to probation and juvenile halls, is that community partnership, community programs that can possibly even help supplement programs in juvenile hall are critically important. So I really like the idea and the partnerships you have there that really bridge that gap with community. Thank you for sharing that.
Adolfo, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you were able to hire folks within the federal system, and maybe if there are some lessons learned for breaking down those barriers in other jurisdictions.
Absolutely. What we do is that we work with the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. So when we bring the folks in, they already have some political. Talked about Mr. Mendoza talked about having the contact with the elected officials. In our system here, everything is managed through Congress. So getting the political will at the front end makes a big difference. Just able to bring people in, to bring them in at the like entry level based on their education experience. Do offer a lot of opportunities for education, whether it's high school diploma or continual higher education. And then once they get hired in, they go through the regular process of being a federal employee. We have a lot of employees that can go from one agency to another agency, all the federal government, not just in probation and parole. So so they have an opportunity to move completely to another federal agency. And the good thing about that is that once they get off probation, do their time, they can go anywhere in the country. They're not locked into just DC. We have a lot of our returning citizens throughout the federal prison because it's part of the Federal Bureau of Prison system. So we have engagement opportunities through Zoom. We reached out to like 39 different federal prisons, 130 something residents that are DC residents, getting them ready to come back. We started working with them about 6 months out before they get released, so that when they come out, they already have something more meaningful for them. And we did that regularly, like every 6 months or so, we have different programs going on. And that's led through Minister Cedric. And what we try to do is connect the individual with what they feel comfortable with. As you mentioned before, going back to the community where they came from, DC is not very large, so everybody knows everybody. So you can't relocate them somewhere else, like in Maryland or Virginia, and then pay DC money to pay for that. You got to be in the DC area. So we try to get them in jobs that can get them the opportunity to travel, to move to other agencies once they get on board, so you can have that experience. And the federal government, and like I say, take the act of Congress. It is very cumbersome. But once they get in, they're able to maneuver and work themselves around from a variety of backgrounds.
That's great. Thanks, Adolfo.
Andrew, if I might just add that having worked in different places, that is a challenge to try to get some policymakers to really see what the future holds. But if you can get the one individual who could be a champion for your cause, I think open up more doors. Some folks don't want to take a risk, depending on whether which way the wind is blowing. But if you're talking about doing the right thing for the right reasons, everything we do is working towards a common goal and working together to make a difference in our communities. Because everybody, like I tell my staff, everybody's going to come back in our neighborhood and back into our community. And I want the community members that feel proud of their neighborhood, but most importantly, be safe in our neighborhood. We have to work with them to eliminate some of those barriers, whether it's transportation, education, health. One of the biggest things I see here is mental health issues that are taking place. And a lot have to do with substance abuse, co-occurring disorders, and providing those services that within the jurisdiction where you work can afford to bring up to speed where they need to be. There's a lot of issues. For example, here in DC, we don't charge for fines and fees. Where if you go to Maryland, you're going to pay $50 a month for supervision. So they come back to the DC area because we don't charge them. We provide the services. That's another thing we can do is eliminate those fines and fees. And we talked about it here at the Justice Lab. What are the barriers we can remove to make our returning citizens more successful?
Thanks, Adolfo. And yeah, I think there are a lot of barriers, and it can be really helpful to have some of those to like make connections with the right folks. I know going back when New York City was starting its Credible Messenger program, they had, like Monica was saying, a series of like community listening sessions, and New York City is obviously a pretty rich area. So they did it in partnership with some of the community organizations that are based here. But that did not stop the probation office from basically receiving a lot of heat in those first community conversations. And they had to be willing to hear that and not be defensive about it, and, you know, sort of engage in a productive way to hear those concerns and address them. And I think it was a real learning experience on both sides. So that even with the best intentions, it's not always easy, but I think it's always worth it.
I might say for us, we're in a smaller community than it sounds like most of you all are. Bloomington, Indiana, it's a college town with about 45,000 students. And the city of Bloomington's only got about 70,000 persons. So it's basically a university town. But trying to get the word out to people has been difficult too. Our local newspaper, to even call it a newspaper is just too generous. It used to be a real newspaper, but now it's a piece of paper, and that's really not how people get their news anymore. So we ended up hiring Laura Furr, talking about hiring a consultant being a good idea for our JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, to try to get some families engaged. And they had a little bit more success because through JDAI, through the grants that we get from the state of Indiana, we were able to give gift cards, we were able to feed people, and so we had a little bit more participation, but we still found it really difficult to get the word out to anybody that we were interested in hearing their opinion or having them participate. And we still struggle with that on the juvenile side. We haven't started on the adult side yet. We don't have the resources on the adult side that we do on the juvenile, but it's a struggle. So I don't know if any of you have any ideas of how you get the word out if you're interested in hearing from people or having committees and that sort of thing. How do you go about that?
That's a great question, Linda. Thank you for sharing. It's funny. That there's one grapevine saying that comes to mind, but I can't remember at the moment. But some of the tools that really helps us spread the word about opportunities to come together as community and discuss things really was social media. Was really helpful more than newspapers or outlets. It is really that by word of mouth that is really helpful, especially when it being pushed out by those directly impacting themselves, whether it's a credible messenger or somebody you hire. It's those easier to use tools that the community is going to want to need to grab hold of versus a newspaper or magazine, right? I think it's taking consideration who our audience is that we want to reach out to and using those tools that they're used to using every day of their lives, which is either a phone or social media. Magdalena, I see your hand up.
Yes, hi. I was trying to access, I was a little late because I didn't follow the rules and go back to the registration. So my name is Magdalena Morales Aina. I'm originally from East LA. I came to Texas when I was 12. And I am a director of a probation department. So on the 25th, it was my 29th year of working with justice-involved individuals. I've been a chief now for 13 years, going on 13 years. But I was a mental health probation officer. And the comment that was made earlier is, yeah, we have to be able to hear it because that's the truth, is probation and parole institutions we've not always used the best practices to engage with justice-involved individuals. So I wanted to chime in how do we engage a community? So I do a lot of training on equity and inclusion. And many times, because there is a distrust, and many times it's a distrust from people, specifically people from historically disadvantaged groups. So what do? Something the research suggests is that we champion and we partner with organizations that the target population, whoever it is that we're trying to engage, already trusts. So we find champions in that community. And, we're for real. We don't just need to study. We don't need this. What we're trying to do is have an impact. How do we reach the folks that you're serving? And many times that could be, not everybody has social media, not everybody, especially for those who, as I don't have to tell you this, Michael, who are recently released or just a person who doesn't have the socioeconomic ability to, have a smartphone. So a lot of it is making sure that we hit all the points. Is for those who are older, who went in. I have a cousin who was released. He did 30 years. He got released a couple of years ago, and I'm hopeful he graduates from the LA college this week. And he went in as a young man. When he came out, I supported him through electronic, and a lot of it was not even knowing how to text. So that for him was, you know, a big thing. So it's really meeting people where they're at. There's not going to be a one-stop shop or a fix for everyone. We really have to be able to identify who we're trying to identify, who we're trying to reach out to. So for some may not have the ability to use social media because when they went in, it wasn't available. And for others, they're going to many times go back to agencies that historically have been advocates for not only justice involved individuals, but for marginalized communities. So it's really about identifying those champions within the communities who are serving in one way or another, whether it be through medical. California, you know, has Medicaid expansion. So clinics, you know, organizations, educational, adult education organizations, anywhere that people are already accessing services, a trusted agency. You talk about credible messengers. How about credible organizations that have met the test of time by being a support system, by being there for people when they needed them? So that's all.
Hello, Michael. I just want to say congratulations on the work that you've done. And speaking from an Illinois standpoint of view for the whole state and obviously dealing with Chicago, I've had some positive and negatives of the advocacy groups and how they've introduced stuff. Obviously, the community-based ones we've worked best with, and our agents have worked the best with because, you know, it's boots on the ground. We're hearing from them. And the things that, you know, like you said, it's hard to hear, but, you know, it's things that we need to hear about change. One of the difficult things that, you know, I address a lot is the advocacy groups that necessarily don't deal with the people in the community, but think they have the best answers and deal with the politicians. And the politicians in hindsight are not dealing with the experts in the field, so to speak. And there's laws being passed, and it's happened a lot here as of recent in Illinois, where, you know, on the back end, we're trying to get laws stopped or changed because it's going to be more detrimental to the people we serve than what they think. Because, you know, they have the thought process that this is going to work, or they're pushing their own personal agenda for certain things and not something necessarily that's going to benefit the people we serve. So my experience has always been we've gotten more from those in the community in which we partner with because they know what's best for their people in the community. And as big as Chicago is kind of like Los Angeles, I'm sure it's kind of segregated. So each community has different needs for that population. So that's been the biggest proponent for us. That's really helps myself and my staff to get things done instead of having to fight things on the other end from somebody else's personal agenda to say they got a bill passed or whatever. And it's really counterproductive, so to speak.
Michael, I have a follow-up question for you about, you mentioned about using social media. Are you talking about Facebook or, I mean, is there something else?
Social media in general, but to Magdalena's point, it's just really getting to know who you're trying to reach out to. So it's going to be more than just social media. It'll be a phone call if possible, gathering, you know, weekly gatherings in your office, inviting people over. There's just going to be a lot of different ways. But yeah, traditional social media, Facebook, everyone seems to have a Facebook or Instagram. Our advocacy efforts use a lot of social media just to get people to understand a bill's going up for committee. Make sure you call your elected official, or, you know, those kind of tools. But as many of them as you can. You know, and I do appreciate those comments as well, Jason. I was just thinking about, you know, there are going to be hard conversations when the community is involved. And unfortunately, in today's politics, yeah, I mean, there are agendas, and we're seeing the consequences all over the place. I just firmly believe that the more we're able to speak to the people on the opposite side, regardless of what policy issue they're pushing on, and at least hear each other out, I think that's what we have to just force ourselves to sit through, right? Is sit through those conversations where our ears are burning, but we're also thinking about how to not just build towards a better future, but I mean, let's face it, we have a country that is really politically ostracized right now, and how are we going to fix that? And it's going to start with groups like this, and every little issue area to do our part, and just start having those meaningful conversations regardless if we disagree or not. So I appreciate you just emphasizing and bringing that up again.
But not to beat a dead horse, but I agree with you 100%, Michael, because I think when we had those conversations, we're meeting each other in their own place. And that's huge, especially if we want change. And I'm talking about at the level of my agents who are working those communities, and they're hearing from the people in the communities of what's good and what's bad, and vice versa. And it's, to me, I think more comes out of that than from necessarily the top down, so to speak, because then there's not been much discussion at all. And it's just like, okay, here's where we go. And sometimes in that case, neither side's happy with it because it's not the goal they're trying to achieve. So yes, definitely, it's hard conversations, but conversations that need to be had.
And I just like to add, I think it's just about being inclusive, and everybody has a position. And like you said, we meet not only agencies where they're at, but people where they're at, and
Right.
different strokes for different folks. And some folks may have access to great advocacy organizations, and others were kind of standing alone trying to make a difference. But I think honoring the spirit of wanting to make a difference, and how do we move forward from there. So I think that having such platforms and sharing how it all started and what one person can do, and talking about the polarizing of our institutions right now. My son is a recent graduate, and I told him that it's important that you figure out what's important to you, and how you can make a difference, because that's how I raised him. You can make money if you want, but it's important that you give back. That's how you honor what we have. And I think it's just a culture of building into that. And some of us don't know how to do that. How do we give back? And everybody, as long as we consider that there's so many people who are voiceless, and if we have a platform that we can create a safe space for folks to say, this is really what I need. But also knowing that there's a lot of folks who have been institutionalized who can't voice, this is what I need. Because I've always been just given what they think I need. So it's really about empowerment. It's really about, I think Adolfo talked about, mental health and so forth. And it's really about, I think, meeting people where they're at, getting them at least the basic needs. And then we start working our way up, and figuring out how can we be a support system? How can we be an ally? What do we need to do? As a probation director, I still will go out on crisis calls. I'll still do what I need to do, because that's what I don't need to hear everybody else's interpretation. I'm hearing it directly from the clients. This is what we need. How can we do better? How have we, what else can we do to better serve you? And I think it's just a change. And let me tell you, I was just doing a presentation in a nearby town, and one of the public defenders said, I didn't realize you were from probation till I read your bio, because our probation doesn't talk that way. And I said, well, we have to start somewhere, and we have to start making a difference and listening. But, and I can tell you that I've been criticized and called everything else, but, a probation officer. But the truth is that our role as community supervision officers has evolved, and we're agents of change, and we have to see ourselves in that way. But the culture in that case, unfortunately, does stop from the top down, you know, because people are going to be responsive to who's heading that agency. So I think, you know, the American Probation Parole Association is maybe a place to start, where we start broadcasting this. And we've been doing it for a very, very long time. You know, I'm part of the wellness committee, but I think a lot of it is just continuously being open to challenges that are going to come because of what we're doing. And especially right now, where the tough on crime, you know, is very popular. It's really not about, you know, clashing. It's really about saying, you know, like you said, Michael, we listen to other people, but we have to be able to come together and meet someone where they're at and not be discouraged or derailed by the climate. That's all I got to say.
Well, I think Jason has it really tough because he's working at a state level. And most of us were working at a county level, and we struggle just at a county level, trying to take on a whole state, especially one where you have, not unlike what's here in Arizona, where Phoenix kind of rules, and Cook rules the rest of suburban and rural Illinois. So I really, Jason, I totally hear you and understand the struggle. But one of the things that would be interesting is using the community-based organizations to take on some of the more difficult advocacy people as your ally. And I'm sure you've done that, you know, but I really, having once been a state director in New York, I totally understand what drives things. But I think that's, and Michael, maybe you can talk about it because you came out of the LA County, which is one of the major drivers. But how did you build the coalition in, and I forget how many counties there are in California, there's a lot, to really move some of those bills?
58 counties in California.
How many, Adolfo?
58. 58.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Barbara, was that question, who was that question for?
I was just going to ask you, because Jason really has a unique situation in that you're dealing with a lot of us that are at county level, except for the District of Columbia, which is a federal. But he really has to confront, how do you deal with a statewide organization and basically run it where you have a major metropolitan area in Cook County versus all the others. And one of the things, you know, that I've been, you know, really envious of is how California has been able to move the reform issue without necessarily crossing over, you know, as crazy as it could get.
No, yeah, great question. And you know, when I think about some of our toughest issues, I'll just bring up my favorite bill, SB 1391. It made California the first state in the country to stop sending kids 14 and 15-year-olds to adult court. And it was difficult because we literally had to look at county by county, and we had to, you know, work with folks that necessarily disagreed. But I think the key ingredients in the state-based kind of advocacy effort coalition really is looking at your strongest counties, your strongest partners, in terms of state agencies, elected officials. But honestly, it was the voters. It was the people on the ground that, you know, gathered communities in different key districts that we needed to move votes. It was the people on the ground who picked up the phones, made the phone calls, took the trips to Sacramento, did letter writing, you know, did phone banking. So I mean, again, it's in the larger arenas, it's the more influential communities, like in California, you're gonna go to LA. You're gonna do a lot of work in LA, Sacramento, San Diego, and so it's really just partnering with your strongest communities and allies. I don't know if that answers the question. It's not always like an easy answer, right? But I just found that when you get people that are really passionate about an issue, they'll go to every length to use their own resources to make it happen. So for us, it was just a lot of key counties, key partnerships, and a lot of mobilizing.
I can share a little bit from our perspective at the lab as an organization that was kind of mobilized by an advocacy coalition for the less is more stuff. So, I mean, that advocacy coalition was definitely multifaceted. They engaged a lot of faith communities, different types of faith communities in the end. Some of the most difficult areas to move happened to be in areas like Long Island, where there were really strong faith communities. And so finding a couple of different temples and church organizations that were on board and could then, like Michael was saying, sort of take the lead in getting the word out to their constituencies was really key. But going to speak to legislators or phone banking or joining like statewide Zoom calls, none of that is necessarily central to my character or my day job, but we had sort of really consistent asks, I would say, made the difference. Like that ask to do one of those three things was present at least once a month, if not 2 or 3 times a month, to do a phone bank or to do a like day at the Capitol or to, write an op-ed or to join a statewide call. So if you translate that into the probation context, I think consistency and trying to reach out to the community in multiple ways over an extended period of time can like convince people that you're not going away, like that you are actually interested in their participation. Because I'll admit the first 2 times that I was asked to join whatever it was, I was like, oh, they don't really mean me. They mean all of the other folks that are real New Yorkers. Because I didn't really feel like a real New Yorker at that point. Still don't. Does anyone ever feel like a real New Yorker? I don't know. But I think that's highly relatable for communities getting outreach from your probation or parole department. Like there's going to be some thoughts like, do they really mean me? Do they really want to hear from me? So as many of you have said, like that consistency in building trust over time and just making a sort of routine ask, I think made the difference in mobilizing, in being mobilized. So I think could help make a difference in mobilizing others. There are some of those advocacy tactics. I know we're just about at time, but Michael, I want to give you the chance for the closing word.
No, I really thank you all for your comments and for all of the work you're doing. I'm grateful for it, and I'm just looking forward to possibly working with you all in the future or just hearing about all the great work you're doing. So I'm grateful for this opportunity and the time I spent with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Really quickly before we all log off, I just want to extend a big thank you to all of you for being here and being a part of this coffee chat. It was really great to hear your experiences, and thank you, Michael, for the presentation. Before we all log off, it would be great if we could take a screenshot in lieu of a group picture. Do folks mind? Okay, I'll take that in 3, 2, 1. Oh, wait, 1 second. Okay, 3, 2, 1. There we go. Thank you so much. And I'm going to drop Michael's email in the chat in case anybody has any questions for him. And then also, if you all have a moment, it would be great if you could fill out this quick little Google form that we have, and that'll kind of give us some feedback on how this coffee chat was helpful to you. And if you have any other exit policy aims that you want us to explore in future coffee chats, this is a great way to communicate that to us. But thank you again so much for your time and participation. This was really great.
Thank you all so much. Take care. Happy Monday.
Thank you.